If you are a Taurus, and you are listening to these words right now, you may already be familiar with the feeling of doing a lot, but saying very little. Not because you have nothing to show, but because deep down, you believe that real value does not need noise. There are seasons in life when Taurus chooses to lower their head and work, taking slow, steady steps, with the patience of a farmer planting seeds into the soil, without knowing the exact day the sprouts will appear. And sometimes that very silence makes you wonder whether anyone sees you at all. There may have been evenings when you came home after dark, carrying a kind of tiredness that feels personal. Not the tiredness of the body, but the tiredness of the mind. Tired from trying for so long while the results still feel unclear. Tired from watching others move faster, speak louder, receive more attention. And in that quiet moment, Taurus may have asked, "Am I walking the wrong path?" But this story does not open to say that something big is about to arrive. It is simply a gentle reminder that not every seed sprouts at the same time. Some seeds must remain underground for a long while, enduring cold, enduring darkness, even enduring doubt, so their roots can grow deep enough to hold. And Taurus, in a very natural way, is often the one who chooses that path. Your perseverance is not loud. It does not ask for immediate praise. It moves like a slow, steady current, quiet, unimpressive at first glance, yet very hard to stop. You may not realize it, but in the days that seem the most ordinary, you have learned how to stand when no one was there to support you. You learned how to calm yourself when no encouragement was given. And more importantly, you learned how to trust the value of honest work, even before anyone else confirmed it. If you look back on the road behind you, you may notice that you have changed more than you think. Not on the surface, but in how much you can endure, how you respond, how you choose silence over complaint. That is not weakness. That is a very Taurus kind of growth. Slow, solid, and deep. This opening message does not say that every effort will be rewarded in the way we hope. It simply suggests that what you are building, even if its shape is not yet visible, is still forming, little by little. Like a large tree, the most important part is not the branches above ground, but the roots no one sees. And those roots are shaped by the days you did not give up, even when no one applauded. If today you feel that you are still in that quiet season, allow yourself to slow down just a little. Not to stop, but to breathe, and to recognize that you are still moving. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. You do not need to compare your pace to someone else's journey. Every seed has its own rhythm, and Taurus has never been meant to rush. There may come a time when someone looks back and realizes you have been there all along, working quietly, growing quietly. But even if that moment has not arrived yet, your consistency alone is already an achievement. An achievement that needs no spotlight, no announcement, only the quiet knowing that you did not abandon yourself during your hardest days. And perhaps that alone is already enough to keep planting seeds for one more day. There will be a morning that feels completely ordinary, with no warning signs at all. You wake up like you always do, carry the same familiar habits, and assume today is just another workday, no different from the rest. And yet, somewhere in the air, something very subtle has shifted. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic. Just a quiet sense that things now carry a little more weight, as if your footsteps are finally leaving a mark. Recognition does not arrive as applause. It may come as a gaze that lingers a second longer than usual, a question asked with genuine trust, or a request that quietly implies you are the right person for the task. These small moments are easy to miss if you are not paying attention. But Taurus, with that quiet sensitivity you carry, usually feels it. Not through logic, but through a deep inner knowing that you are no longer standing on the sidelines. At first, you may not fully believe it. You are used to doing things on your own, carrying your own weight, taking responsibility without being asked. When someone begins to look at you differently, part of you remains cautious, as if afraid this change might be temporary. But time answers without explanations. What you have done, what you have built, what you have held together in silence, slowly finds its own way into the light. What makes this recognition different is that it does not bring a rush of excitement. It feels more like a warm breeze passing by, just enough to remind you that you are not alone on this path anymore. No one lifts you into the clouds. No one promises distant rewards. Only a gentle confirmation that the direction you chose has meaning, that your patient days were not wasted. And it is right in that moment that Taurus often meets a very delicate test. Not a test of action, but a test of mindset. Staying calm when things begin to flow more easily has never been simple. Some people rush ahead, speak louder, try harder to prove themselves. But Taurus moves differently. You sense that what is arriving does not need to be pulled toward you. It needs to be received with steadiness. You keep working the way you always have, only now there is a little less doubt inside, not because you believe you have reached the destination, but because you are beginning to trust that this road truly leads somewhere. And sometimes, that trust alone is enough to keep everything moving forward. When results begin to show, they do not ask you to become someone else. They simply invite you to stand a little taller inside the same old shoes, to look back on your journey with gentleness, and to continue forward at that same unhurried pace. Because Taurus understands something deeply, the things that last never come from rushing, and it is precisely when you keep that rhythm, not speeding up, not slowing down to please anyone, that the space around you begins to change in a very subtle way. You may not notice it right away, but the atmosphere no longer feels the same. There are glances that linger a little longer. There are silences that appear when you enter the room. There are conversations that pause mid-sentence, then continue differently. This does not need to be named with heavy words. It is not a threat. It is not something to fear. It is simply a very human response when a familiar order shifts. When you stay in one place for too long, no one really notices. But when you begin to stand more firmly, when your presence becomes clearer in shared spaces, that change is naturally felt. Taurus, with your observant and grounded nature, rarely rushes to conclusions. You do not need to label those looks. You do not need to assume that someone is working against you. And you do not need to shrink yourself either. You only need to recognize that you are no longer standing where you once were. And every shift, no matter how quiet, brings mixed emotions from the world around it. Some people will feel happy for you. Some will say nothing at all. And some may feel uncomfortable, even if they never express it. That discomfort does not come because you did something wrong. It comes because your presence has unintentionally reflected something they are not yet ready to face within themselves. Taurus does not need to respond to that. Your calmness is already the clearest answer. What matters is that you do not allow external vibrations to disturb your inner rhythm. There is no need to prove anything. No need to compare. No need to explain. When light becomes clear enough, it illuminates on its own. And when shadows appear, they are simply a natural result of that light. You are not responsible for regulating the emotions of others. Instead of meeting uneasy looks with defensiveness, Taurus can see them as a marker, a point of recognition that you have entered a different phase of your journey. Not higher than anyone, not competing with anyone, just different. And difference always takes time to be accepted. In this moment, clarity matters more than emotional reaction. You do not need to close yourself off, but you also do not need to throw every door wide open. Maintain your sense of balance. Keep your familiar rhythm. Continue doing your work with care and consistency. When you do not waver, the noise around you eventually settles on its own. And then, in that quiet, Taurus realizes you were never truly alone. It is simply that the road ahead is opening into a new shape, one where you learn to stand steady amid many different gazes, while still keeping your inner peace intact. And from there, Taurus slowly comes to understand something very simple, yet something not everyone learns in time. That not everything needs to be spoken. And not every step needs someone walking beside you to confirm that it counts. There are seasons when silence is not avoidance, but a form of preservation, preserving your energy, preserving your direction, preserving what you worked so hard to build. When things begin to move, the urge to share often appears. To share in order to be recognized, to be understood, or simply to feel that you are not walking alone. But Taurus, through lived experience, gradually realizes that some plans need to be held in quiet. Not out of fear that someone might take them away, but because they need space to mature before being placed in the light. Moderation here does not mean closing off. It means discernment, knowing who needs to know, how much is enough, and when it is time to stop. Not every smile requires your trust, and not every question needs an answer. Taurus is not cold. You have simply learned to respect your own timing. You continue working. You continue refining the small details, even as the outside world may feel restless in its own way. You do not need to chase explanations, and you do not need to respond to every rumor or assumption. When the foundation is strong enough, the structure stands on its own, without needing words to hold it upright. There is a very particular strength in calmness. It does not create noise right away, but it causes others to slow down when they are near you. Not because they feel intimidated, but because they sense a clear boundary, a quiet certainty that does not need to be displayed. And that boundary protects you better than any justification ever could. Taurus understands that true results do not need constant guarding through hypervigilance. They are protected through consistency. Doing today what you did yesterday, and doing it again tomorrow. Not rushing to elevate yourself with words. Not shrinking yourself through doubt. Simply continuing, one step at a time, in a silence deep enough to hear yourself clearly. And when you speak less, it is not because you have nothing to say, but because you have chosen to let your actions speak for you. And it is within that intentional silence that another voice begins to rise. Not from the outside world, but from within. A voice that feels familiar. One that often appears at the end of the day, when everything is done, and no one is left there but you. A gentle question, yet persistent. Asking whether you truly deserve what is slowly beginning to open in front of you. Taurus is not unfamiliar with this feeling. You are not someone who becomes easily self-satisfied. And you are not comfortable standing above others, looking down. So when something better than before comes into reach, your first reaction is rarely celebration. It is self-examination. You remember very clearly the moments you stumbled, the times you were not good enough yet, the days you had to start again, quietly from the beginning. And those memories sometimes make you forget just how far you have already traveled. But if you pause long enough to truly look, you begin to see that your value was never shaped by applause. It was built in the nights you stayed later than necessary, in the difficult decisions you did not avoid, in the moments you chose what was right instead of what was easy. Ability is not something that is handed out. It is something forged, slowly, through real experience. Self-doubt, when seen from another angle, is not always the enemy. It can be a sign that you still hold integrity toward yourself, that you still want to do better, deeper, truer. The issue is not whether doubt exists, but whether you let it lead, or whether you simply listen and continue walking. Taurus does not need to convince themselves that they are perfect. You only need to honestly look back at the road you have already walked, with all of its rough stretches and all of its endurance. Every experience leaves a mark, and it is those marks that create a depth no one can take away from you. Not everyone is willing to walk such a long road, and that alone carries meaning. When you begin to understand that true value does not need comparison, self-doubt slowly softens. It does not disappear completely, but it becomes small enough that it no longer blocks your path. You keep moving forward, not because you are certain everything will be fine, but because you know you have gathered enough experience to face whatever comes next, no matter what shape it takes. And sometimes, simply realizing that is enough to make the heart feel much lighter. When the mind is no longer stretched tight by questions about self-worth, Taurus begins to see things more clearly, especially the way you look at money. It is no longer something to chase, and no longer something to prove to anyone else. It appears more like a current, moving alongside the rhythm of the life you are building. Quiet, yet organized. Taurus understands that money does not come from a sudden stroke of luck. It usually shows up as the result of trust, of relationships nurtured over time, of work done steadily with responsibility. You may not see it clearly today, but every small decision, every moment you chose what was right instead of what was fast, has been shaping a foundation that money eventually finds on its own. There are no promises here of instant abundance, only a very human truth, that the way you treat your work and the people around you is reflected in how money moves through your life. When you keep your word, when you work with consistency, you send out a clear signal. And over time, that signal is answered in its own way. Taurus also learns that keeping money matters just as much as earning it, not by holding it with fear or restriction, but with awareness, knowing what is enough, what is necessary, and what can wait a little longer. Every amount, large or small, carries responsibility, and how you use it reveals a great deal about how you see the future. There are moments when you stand at a choice between spending to soothe a temporary emotion or investing in long-term stability. And Taurus, with your instinct for security, often leans toward the latter. Not because you do not know how to enjoy life, but because you understand how valuable peace of mind truly is. In this story, money is not the destination. It is a tool that helps you stand more firmly, that gives you more freedom in the choices you make. And when you stop placing the meaning of your life into numbers, money no longer carries the pressure to prove anything. It becomes a natural part of living, coming and going, yet always able to return when the foundation remains strong. And it is that calm, that inner steadiness, that allows Taurus to build a sense of fullness from within, long before it ever appears on the outside. And then, as your work begins to find a clearer rhythm, Taurus notices something else quietly unfolding within. Emotions become more sensitive, more easily touched. There are days when you carry the echo of work back home with you. Unfinished thoughts, a lingering sense of responsibility for too many things at once. Not because you want to, but because you are used to carrying weight, used to keeping everything under control. Yet life is not measured only by what gets completed in a day. There is another space, softer, slower, waiting for you each time you step through a familiar door. In that space, you do not need to prove your ability. You do not need to be right. You do not need to be strong. You only need to be present, as your most human self. Taurus sometimes forgets this, not out of carelessness, but because you take responsibility so seriously. Balance does not come from doing less or doing more. It comes from knowing when to set a role down, when to leave work behind, even if only for a few hours. At first, this may not feel easy. You may still feel tense, still preoccupied. But when you allow yourself to slow down, to listen to a story that has nothing to do with work, to share a meal without rushing through it, things begin to soften. The relationships closest to you do not require perfection. They ask for your presence, in its most honest form, a focused look, an unhurried reply, a pause long enough for someone else to feel truly heard. Taurus has a natural ability to create that sense of safety. You just sometimes forget to offer it to the people closest to you. When you learn to soften where no defense is needed, your energy restores itself in a very natural way. You return to work the next day not with tension, but with steadiness. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer carrying yesterday's weight into today. Life, when you really look at it, is a flow between doing and living. And Taurus, with your steady pace, can learn to move gracefully between those two shores, without abandoning responsibility, without forgetting yourself. As that balance slowly forms, you begin to notice that you are not only moving forward, but living more fully with every step you take. And when the journey briefly settles into a rare moment of stillness, Taurus can look around and realize you have traveled farther than you once believed. Not to compare, not to feel proud, but to understand that every step, no matter how small, has shaped the person you are today. In that realization, gratitude appears softly. No grand words, just a quiet warmth spreading slowly from within. There are moments when stopping and quietly thanking life does not slow you down. It steadies you. Grateful for the difficult days that taught you patience. Grateful for moments of doubt that helped you understand yourself more deeply. And grateful even for the silences, because it was there that you learned what truly matters. Humility does not come from making yourself smaller. It comes from remembering where you began and why you chose this path in the first place. Taurus, with your deep connection to roots, rarely forgets that. No matter how life shifts, you carry with you the values that shaped you early on: sincerity, endurance, and a belief in what creates lasting meaning. When seen through this lens, achievement is no longer something to display. It becomes a form of responsibility. The responsibility to live with more kindness, to choose with greater care, to treat yourself and others with more gentleness. Not always perfectly, but with a steady intention to stay true. Moving slowly does not mean falling behind. For Taurus, it is a way to feel the ground beneath your feet, to know that every step has support. And when you walk with that steadiness, whatever good may come, if it comes, will arrive at the right time, in the right way, without being forced, without being rushed. As this story closes, there are no promises made, only a gentle reminder that your journey has value in every moment you are living right now. Keep going, with gratitude as your foundation, humility as your direction, and a quiet trust that while everything comes and goes, what you build with sincerity will always remain.